Afternoon. Thanks for having me, and afternoon to your listeners. We're seeing an increased amount of parents approaching us, particularly after schools opened yesterday. And the main problems which we're seeing is a large number of grade 8 and grade 1 learners who haven't received a place at school despite making applications last year for school. We're seeing learners who are moving from one province to another, not being able to find a school in the province that they move into. And quite honestly, we're seeing a large number of schools which are oversubscribed and honestly don't have enough space to take up more learners. We're also seeing some discriminatory practices where some undocumented learners who are foreign nationals or refugees are not being given places in schools and being told that they can't get places because they don't have ID documentation or necessary identification.
And what do you believe are the infrastructural changes that need to be put in place and enforced in order to make sure that we don't end up having exactly the same problem year after year, having to deal with school placements?
I mean, one of the biggest concerns is infrastructure. The reality is many of our schools are oversubscribed, are overcrowded. And until such a time as government meets their norms and standard requirements for basic infrastructure in schools, we are sadly going to continue seeing this problem year in and year out. So for us, I think that that's the main area which needs some attention. It's of course worrying because with COVID-19 last year, we saw a decrease in the infrastructure budgets for basic education. So it's concerning whether or not the DBE will be able to meet those norm and standards requirements.
And as far as undocumented pupils, how ought they to be treated?
There was a court order which was received in 2019, a case which was brought by the Centre for Child Law. And there the court was quite unequivocally clear that the right to basic education within South Africa should be enjoyed by every learner, irrespective of their nationality. And so in instances where a learner is unable to produce a form of identification, that case was clear that they should still be allowed to access a school and that it's discriminatory to say that they can't. In those instances, the advice we give to parents is to go to a police station, attest to an affidavit and take the affidavit to the school. And a school should not be denying learners access to education because they don't have relevant documentation.
And in which areas and provinces are you finding the most problems as far as school placements are concerned?
In the past, the hotspots have been Gauteng and the Western Cape, but with the trends that we're seeing from the statistics which the minister shared on her briefing on Sunday, we're seeing Western Cape still being quite far, with about 8,000 learners cumulatively who haven't been placed, for example, in grade 8 and grade 1, never mind the other grades. And then right behind them, we've got Limpopo and the Northwest. But we are keen to see, we're still trying to see from the ground whether or not the numbers which we're getting from the DBE speak to the experiences from the ground. But currently it seems like it is so.
And as far as the type of assistance that you offer parents, how do you assist them and what are the kind of problems that they come to you with?
So the Equal Education Law Centre has a daily education clinic where a walk-in clinic where parents are able to contact us and we try to firstly empower them to try and deal with the issues. We give them the steps which they need to follow in liaising with the schools and with the education district departments. If, however, they're not successful on that level, we ordinarily then assist parents with lodging an appeal with the MEC. And so really, we just empower parents and help them through their problems.
And you talk about parents having rights. What are the rights of a parent in situations like this?
Look, I suppose it's more correct to say that learners have a right. So learners have a right to basic education, and their parents, as their caregivers in terms of the Children's Act, they have a duty to care for the child, and they have an obligation in terms of the South African Schools Act to ensure that all learners of school-going age are in school. So I suppose it's more obligations that parents have towards their learners, and the right really actually sits with the learner.
If a pupil gets admitted into a school that is perhaps not convenient for them to be in, whether it's because it's too far from home or whatever the dynamics may be, what are the scenarios around them getting schools that are more convenient for them, or are they literally forced to take whatever is available?
Sadly, we see this happening a lot. So we have a lot of parents coming to us and saying, I didn't get my school of choice. And the reality is often a parent's school of choice is already oversubscribed and already has too much demand from learners who are in close proximity. So there, the starting point is that the DBE has a responsibility to make sure that every child has access to a school, not necessarily their school of choice or the school that you think is the best. But there are instances where there's room for parents to speak to the district and to try and liaise with the Department of Education if there are compelling considerations or concerns. But the reality is, with the barriers which we're already facing in the education system, it's not necessarily possible to always make sure that one gets their first choice. And that is particularly why we often advise parents to apply for more than one school when making an application, because the reality is one is not guaranteed your first choice.
From your experience, are parents informed enough about the admissions process, or do they also tend to make blunders that end up having negative repercussions on the learners themselves?
I think there isn't adequate information for parents. So often you have parents coming who, some of them woke up in the morning, dressed their child in school uniform, and simply walked to the school thinking that the child would have a place. Often you have parents who don't know how to properly use the systems which are in place to apply for learners electronically for grade 8 and grade 1. And so I do think that there's a need for more communication. And if there was more communication and guidance for parents, I think we'd see less parents coming to us who have either followed the wrong process or didn't know what to do. So I think you're correct. I think communication is very key.
We spoke to Steve Mabona on Newzroom Afrika around the work that they are doing to ensure that learners are being placed. How would you rate the work of the department? Are they doing enough?
I think Gauteng, as I said, is doing increasingly better than they do in ordinarily. So ordinarily, as I said, they're usually at the forefront of numbers. What we're seeing from the DBE and the numbers we're seeing are saying that there's a decrease. But quite honestly, on our end, I think it's quite early for us to say. It's only the second days of schools having opened, and the numbers in our law clinic are quite high, and they speak to the same kind of numbers which we've had in previous years. And so the indication we're getting from the ground is that the need is still as compelling as it's ever been in any year. And so I think it's premature to tell now.
All right, we'll leave it at that, Ms. Phala. Thank you so much for your time.